Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you can do this.
Love me, love me, love me, say you do. Let me fly away with you.
Because this is Airwindows kStation. Now, that might not sound as good as the real Bowie, because that was just me. I tried to sing in a Bowie-ish like way, and honestly, the bits of it that came closest were the fact that that was the first take of that little snippet of sound. I tried other ones, and they always sounded like I was trying to do another take. That's something that Bowie actually did quite a lot of, leaning on that first issuance,
love me, say.
that first little emotive addressing of the song. But the point that we're talking about here is kStation, and this is a new reverb, and it's based on the same concepts that I was working on in K Guitar Hall 2. Namely, I've been developing reverb algorithms and evaluating them and measuring them in such a way that the most important factor is having them have very high peak over RMS loudness within a narrow band around where the Fletcher-Munson curve is the most sensitive. So what that means is it's clear in the mid-range, but it's also deep sounding in the mid-range. And I can demonstrate that with my usual noises rather than going back to a singing that's probably not very good, like here's drums. Here's the plugin. And for that matter, what I can do is also, I did have Silken on that voice. I'll tell you more about how I recorded the voice later. You might wonder a little bit about that, because I say you can do that, and yet I'm flinging around these expensive microphones and things fairly often, because I've invested in that over the years. But with the humbler microphones and without Silken, here's a regular old drum sound. And this is what kStation sounds like, because it's a small room. Now, I've exaggerated the smallness of it a little bit through the course of doing this. For instance, if I turn up regen, it'll sustain more. And you can do that if you want. You don't have to. Part of the point of having a reverb that's a really tiny small room is being able to use it so that the regeneration doesn't hang on and blur everything out. By the same token, if we were to do this with the drums, and rather than have it be sustainy, cut it right out, there's practically nothing to it anymore. And here is where you can fool around with some of the things like position. And here's where we really hear the difference between position settings, because if we make position maximum, it's the maximum amount of sort of pre-delay. And you can kind of hear a slapback, sort of, maybe, kind of. But then we can pull it back to the back wall of this tiny space to where it's reinforcing the lows. And this gets a very distinct sound, even though it is not what you would call a sustainy sound. Sustainy sound ends up getting kind of like this. And of course we can do early reflections, or lack of early reflections. And it follows the same principle as K Guitar Hall 2, where if you're adjusting the position, this is altering a sort of flangey quality that it'll have. And of course, we've also got derez. Derez works the same way as the other ones that use the Bezier. Actually, no, all of the derezes work like this. Filter works differently if it's Bezier. So if you go this direction, it is continuous, meaning that there will be a funny artifact going on. And then if you go the other way, it is stepped. There's a little slower and a little longer. And as we continue, we get into a much longer, more sustaining quality. And that sounds like a big reverb now because we've dropped the sampling rate of the reverb. This also makes it much more economical CPU-wise to process because we're not really running the reverb very often. And again, it's the same deal if you do it continuous. Except for there's more of a funny overtone with it as you go. And then filter is another Bezier filter. So in this case, you can go darker cleanly. It's not terribly obvious, the tone of it, but that's because it's not interfering with the sound very much. And then we can also dial the tone back in a way that interferes with it more by using the positive end of the filter. So you can really hear some of the funny overtones that you get out of it. And in fact, we could... I have a noisy lawnmower that's kicking around, so I'm going to have to cut this short or hope that it stops. Or maybe it won't stop. Who knows? I don't necessarily have control of all these things. It stopped, at least for a moment. Yay. So here we are with kStation, and kStation is your small reverb choice for the new Airwindows reverbs. For now, I'm going to be doing more, and I'm actively interested in doing more small reverbs. The hope is that I can have the small reverbs continue to sound different from each other and name them according to how they remind me of things. And in this case, kStation means I'm going after the sort of vibe and space that you get off of Bowie's vocal reverb on the Station to Station album. Now, I believe that's some kind of early lexicon thing or whatever, run through a particular mixing board with whatever processing they put on it. That's all well and good. I don't want to call it a mimicking of a particular piece of hardware, because I've really gone off of that lately, but also because I don't think that's very useful. You say something like, okay, this is my digital old lexicon, or this is my digital vintage MIDI verb, or whatever. And what use is that if you're actually going after a sound that's inspiring? For the same reason, although I'm working on sounds that derive from recent discoveries in emulating tape, I'm far more interested, as you saw with Disc on Tapity, in taking the stuff that I learn and applying it in some other way. And it's all the more fun if I'm able to apply it in a way that people will recognize without recognizing, hi, this is a free version of this hardware that you want. Instead, let's go after sounds of things, sounds of albums, sounds of stuff that you might want to run with, and see where that takes us. In that light, and since I'm being annoyed by lawnmowers going on all around me, let's call it a day with kStation. And if you didn't like my singing going into it, and I think it did manage to make the sing, I didn't actually show you what that sounded like without any kStation because it's too embarrassing. But if you thought it was an interesting sound and would like to do something like that, you should probably know that although my recording here is a fancy Sennheiser mic, previously a Roswell Carlaris, but that broke on me and I need to send it in and see if it can get fixed. So this is the same fancy Sennheiser mic that people used to complain a lot about my mouth noises over, and I've been working on the signal chain for getting around that. And that lead vocal, that was my phone. So when I say you can do this, part of what I'm working on is to make it so that you can do this with what you've got and easily accessible. Like I use Reaper. Reaper is very easily accessible. They will just let you use it. And free plugins. I would like you to do stuff. And all the more since people want to set you up with button pushing AI things that are never likely to get you anything exactly right and aren't likely to get anything exactly in focus. Why not just do human music instead? It's not that much harder to do. Again, the bit that I played you was literally the first take, and there were problems, but when I tried to fix the problems, the successive takes just sounded like I was trying harder and it didn't really help. You can do music. Music is something that we can do. And on that note, one further note, today's $10 or not patron bonus feature thing that I put on the Patreon is going to be that song, Bowie's Wildest the Wind, off of Station to Station. And it'll be measured on Airwindows meter, and I'm going to do a little bit of talk about what I think is so special about it to go before that, and that is the Patreon bonus. I don't ever withhold plugins. I don't ever withhold things that are really important for people to have to make their music. But if you want a little more time with me talking to you and explaining the things that I love the most, well, that's a $10 and up Patreon feature. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.